Sunday, but I preached about the Holy Spirit, and I didn't say that I was doing this, but I actually described the ministry of the Holy Spirit the whole time.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit's the rod of correction. And so when Jesus talks about the ministry of the Holy Spirit convicting us of sin, it's not talking about convicting us of bad behavior. And it's not talking about convicting us of our sin per se. Because, and this will be a shocking statement for everybody, the Holy Spirit convicted Jesus of sin as he hung on the cross. Now, if your view of what it means for the Holy Spirit to convict somebody of sin can't fit with the sinless guy, then you got a wrong view of what that means. And so when it says that the Holy Spirit convicts us of sin, you have to look at it in the sense of the Holy Spirit also convicted Jesus of sin. So what does that mean? The Holy Spirit is the rod of correction. Well, what was happening to Jesus at the cross? The death of the cross and the tribulation that was going on around him was trying to tell him he'd been orphaned in the earth.
Right.
And that God had turned his back on him.
Right. Yeah.
That's sin. Right? Paul said anything not of faith is of sin. And so sin is talking about a noun there when it convicts us of sin. So sin is a way of thinking. It's a logic. And that logic came to Jesus when he was hanging on the cross. And that logic came and told him, look at your nakedness. Look at the death you have. How can you be the Son?
Right.
Are you really the Son?
Right.
Where's your God now? All those thoughts were sin. The Holy Spirit interceded in Jesus' heart and told him, that's not God's voice. That's the voice of the stranger.
Right.
It convicted him of what sin is. Right?
Yeah.
It convicted him of the truth that that was a lie. It convicted him that he is the Son. It convicted him that God had not abhorred him in his affliction. That God did not hide his face from him. But God would hear him when he called out to him. That he was the beloved Son of God. That God would not suffer his body to see corruption. That God would not leave his soul in sorrow. But that God would come and save him. You see, my God, why have you forsaken me? That was sin.
Right.
Sin was coming to Jesus and saying, look at you. It must mean God's forsaken you. That's what the Pharisees were telling Jesus, right? Yeah. The Pharisees were of their father the devil, Jesus said. And so they were coming with the voice of the devil, which is sin. And the Holy Spirit convicted Jesus, rose up inside of him with a conviction that said, that's the voice of the serpent, that's not the voice of Abba.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Now his heart becomes corrected or realigned, or I don't even want to say realigned, and not corrected in the way we thought of corrected, but kept from the lie and kept through the truth, right? His heart was kept through the rod of correction.
Yes.
It came and corrected that voice. Not Jesus' heart, but it corrected that voice in Jesus' heart. Where in his heart he said, that's not the truth, that's a lie. The conviction of sin. Right? Just like whenever we felt tribulation, we all agree that when we feel tribulation, or something bad happens, we feel far from God. And we start running down the list of all the things that must be. That's those thoughts, those beliefs, they're born from sin, not faith. The Holy Spirit would rise up in our hearts and convict us of that and tell us that's of sin, not of faith. And then we would reject that word. We would say, oh, this isn't happening because I haven't read my Bible enough. Oh, this isn't happening because God's far from me. This isn't happening because of some secret sin I have. This isn't happening because God's rejected me. This isn't happening because God's ashamed of me. This is happening because by one man, Adam, death entered the world. And there's death in this world. And Jesus even said, Jesus didn't say, in the day you have a secret sin, you'll encounter tribulation. He said, you will encounter tribulation in this world.
Yes.
Now, when we encounter the tribulation, it tries to tell us things. And the things it tries to tell us is of sin. Right. And the Holy Spirit convicts us that those words it's trying to tell us aren't true. Right?
So now we add conviction to that bucket with wrath, discipline, chastisement, all of those, obedience, yes, all of those words that we believed, we knew what they meant. From a biblical perspective, we were clueless.
From a biblical perspective, we were clueless.
Yes.
Notice Jesus in Psalm 23, and this is one of my favorite parts of the message. And man, just to drive this home, man, man, I thought that message sucked when I was done. Honestly. Not what was said, but
Right.
I didn't feel like I delivered it very poetically.
Yeah.
Like I thought it was going real well the first half, and then the second half I thought, man, I blew it. But anyway, that just ties into the fear. I don't feel afraid with that anymore. I think, who cares?
Right.
You know what I immediately thought? I thought, whoa. The ability for people to experience comfort from that message isn't found in my eloquence of speech.
Yes.
And woe is all the people if it is.
Yeah.
Right? Because that means they're trusting in me and not God.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
But in that message, one of my favorite parts is talking about Psalm 23 and Jesus. So sin came to Jesus and said, you're not the Son.
Right.
God's abandoned you. He's hid his face from you. Where's your God now? Right? Sin came to him and said that. Then the rod of correction came and said, he has not abhorred you in your affliction.
Right.
Neither has he hid his face from you, but he will come to you when you cry unto him. Jesus, remember the first Adam? You're the last Adam. Remember the first Adam when he was naked. Remember when fear came against the first Adam. Remember he was standing there feeling ashamed and feeling like God had abandoned him and God didn't want him. What did God do there, Jesus? God came to Adam.
Right.
And so the Holy Spirit brought this up in Jesus. And Jesus all of a sudden said, yeah, I see how God came and clothed the first Adam when he was filled with fear and when he was ashamed and when he thought he was abandoned. I see God hadn't abandoned him, but God came to, I'm the last Adam. I see that means God hasn't abandoned me. God isn't going to leave me here. He's going to come and clothe me. For he hath not abhorred the affliction of the afflicted one, neither has he hid his face from him. But when he hears him cry, he comes. And so then Jesus gets into Psalm 23, and what does he say? Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Now, what rod is he talking about there? He's talking about the Holy Spirit. But the rod is also called the rod of correction in Proverbs.
Right.
And you see how God came and corrected the thought that was presented to Jesus through the Spirit of truth.
Yeah.
That comforted Jesus in the midst of the cross. It comforted him with the truth that God was not far from him. God had not abandoned him. That God was with him even in him. The fullness of the Godhead was dwelling in Jesus. Right? And all of a sudden he felt the comfort from the rod of correction. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. They comforted me by coming to me and reminding me of how God dealt with the first Adam. I'm the last Adam. Here I am naked, feeling separated, feeling the lie come against me. And now I see the Holy Spirit has corrected that belief by showing me how God came and clothed the first Adam. I'm the last Adam. God hath not abhorred me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Then Jesus even goes in to say, my cup runneth over.
Yeah.
He's nailed to a cross, man. How could he say that?
How can that be?
How can that be? Right? We lose sight of the fact that the Psalms are prophetically speaking of Jesus' words.
Yeah.
They're revealing his mind and his heart. David is expressing the Spirit of the Son. That's why Psalm 22 is all about the cross. Why do you think Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Psalm 22. Psalm 22 and 23 and 16 and 17 and 18 and 19. And all of those Psalms are revealing the inner workings of the heart of Christ as he hung on the cross.
Wow.
That's why Paul said he lived by the faith of the Son of God.
Right.
And so what the Psalms do is they actually crack open the heart of the Son. And they let us peer inside and see, what did this guy believe as all these things were happening? What was going on in this guy's heart while all these things were happening? Do you know what happens when we begin to read the Psalms like that? Something magical happens where those things become born in us and we find ourselves believing the same way, thinking the same way. And then guess what happens? The same life is born in us, where even if we haven't had a job in 9 months, or no one comes to church to listen because you're a crappy speaker, and no one wants to give you a TED Talk, and no one where you find yourself saying, my cup runneth over. Where even should everybody that was supposed to love you have left you and abandoned you, and you're standing on the side of the road and nothing there, you find yourself saying, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. My cup runneth over. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil.
Right.
Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me.
Right.
Jesus was experiencing the death that came against every human. And there was a truth being made flesh in him, that could be poured out and dwell in all people, and they could find that same thing working in them when they experience the death in the world. And that Holy Spirit would do the same thing inside of them, right? And that's why we preach the Spirit, right? So we can hear what the Spirit says.
Yeah.
That does powerful things to you.
Well, you bet.
Guard your heart.
It guards your heart,
You bet.
right? I mean, even when I say this to people all the time, it's funny. Even if it's painful for you to listen to me, ask God to help you listen. Because I guarantee you, I'm busy talking about a faith that whether it's eloquent or not, it will give birth to the mind of Christ in your heart. And it will cause you to start seeing things like Christ saw them. And it will start protecting your heart, guarding your heart, discerning your heart. It will do all kinds of things.
Yeah. That's when you were talking